Welcome to O State Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad you decided to tune in. Hey, wanted to hop on here real quick. I am getting ready to head to Stillwater, the motherland. I love that place. Grew up in Stillwater. It is just absolutely glorious every time I get to darken the city limits of Stillwater, America. So getting ready to head there, but wanted to throw out a pregame, just a short pregame here, maybe 15, maybe 30 minutes, and maybe not that long, but however long it is that we want to talk about West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and get that out there and get some quick early thoughts. So as we post throughout the day, we'll kind of keep working on some of the concepts we have for this game as we enter. So, hey, it's going to be an exciting day inside Boone Pickens Stadium. It's going to be hot. I hope Oklahoma State fans, it has been disappointing in the last couple of weeks, no doubt about it. I hope OSU fans continue to show up and continue to support these kids. We are not a front-runner school. When your team is playing like it is right now, that's actually when they need you the most. That's when they need you to lift them up the most. So I hope OSU fans show up in abundance today, even though it's going to be very hot, and create a very difficult environment for West Virginia to play in. I certainly hope that happens. I can't wait to get out of here in a couple of minutes and get to Stillwater and enjoy today's game. It will be a lot of fun. So we have a good crowd logging in right now. If you have any questions, let me know. We will get to them. If you have anything you want to talk about this game, let me know, and we will get to those, and we will absolutely answer your question and have a great time talking Oklahoma State and West Virginia. So let me get to the chat right here, and we'll get to those questions if we have any. But some of my thoughts today, I've covered them on some of my social medias. I've talked to several people in the West Virginia camp to kind of get some ideas together as far as the way that this is going to look. The first thing that I wanted to address with today's game is the quarterback for Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman. I know there are a lot of people that feel like Oklahoma State has already moved on from Allen, and that's fine. Hey, that's your opinion to have. And to be honest with you, in today's day of NIL and all of those situations, hey, you get paid to play. Hey, you got to have your big boy pants on when things don't work out the way they are. So I don't feel sorry for any of the criticism that Alan Bowman's taking on. It just is what it is. Plus, when you come to Oklahoma State, first of all, and thank goodness it's this way now. It has not always been this way, but Oklahoma State's one of the best programs in the United States of America. You know, it's definitely top 25, top 30, something like that. So you're going, especially if you're the quarterback, because OSU is known for its offenses. If you come to be the quarterback at Oklahoma State, you are coming to be put in a spotlight. So you have to know, hey, that spotlight's a hell of a lot of fun whenever you're winning and you're making the Big 12 championship and all that. But it also comes with its drawbacks. It's like on my main site, I've tried to devote a little bit more time to my O State Daily site, but the site that I spend my most amount of effort on has been my Dodgers Daily site. Of course, I started that first, but it reminds me of their manager, Dave Roberts, who has won as many or more games than basically any manager in baseball. But Dodgers fans are never happy with them because they've only won one world championship. And his comment to that is, hey, I signed up to be the manager of the Los Angeles Dodgers. There's a lot of great perks that come with that. You get the greatest fan base. You get a fan base that puts the most amount of people in the stands every single year. All of that stuff is great, right? But the down part of it is you have a fan base that does not accept losing whatsoever. And that's kind of what Oklahoma State is turned into. Mike Gundy has created a fan base that just does not accept any kind of length of period of bad play, of underperforming. And you know, a couple of games later, all of a sudden, Oklahoma State fans aren't very happy. So from that perspective, I have zero problems with all the bullets Alan Bowman's taking this week. All of the criticism that comes along with being the quarterback of Oklahoma State. I will say this, though. One thing, I think probably the thing I respect the most about Mike Gundy in terms of his competitive nature is that when you back him into a corner, that is when he is at his best, in my opinion. Mike Gundy, when he's back in the corner, he comes out swinging. He comes out fighting. And I think right now, Alan Bowman as much as any time in his career, even during the quarterback competition. I think he's backed in the corner more now than he ever has been. He has Oklahoma State fans doubting him. He has Oklahoma State fans wanting to move on from him. He has Oklahoma State fans criticizing him. And so that can be, there's two ways you can look at that. You can either sit around and feel sorry for yourself and let that affect you in a negative way and make you just kind of have the woe is me mentality towards it, or you can turn that frustration into motivation and you can use it as fuel to your fire, which is what Mike Gundy always does. You doubt Mike Gundy, he's going to prove you wrong. So we'll see if Alan Bowman has that same kind of competitive spirit that his head coach does. Does Alan Bowman have that competitive spirit like, hey, you want to doubt me? I'll show you. And I think today is a day where that could happen because point blank, West Virginia is not good at all on the back end. Their entire secondary is transfers. Now, a couple of them are from Division I, and they thought it was going to be better than it has been, but it just has not worked. It has not been good for West Virginia. And so their secondary just isn't good, and so they have a couple of options. They can either drop a couple of safeties and try to beef up their secondary and defending the pass game by putting a couple secondary guys in, which if they do that, now you have a lighter Bucks. They may be thinking, well, Oklahoma State doesn't run the ball very well, so if we beef up our secondary, just try to contain OSU's run game, then we can at least be a defense that is solid, right? That's one way they could look at it. Or the other poison would be beef up the box and then try to blitz Alan Bowman and try to get him into being what we've seen him do from time to time, where he gets antsy, he flushes the pocket too fast, he gets jittery and throws off his back foot, which sometimes he does that even without pressure in his face. So if West Virginia, to me, if they stack the box and try to stop the run with what they have on the back end, this should be a 300-yard passing day for Alan Bowman. This should be a get-good day. This should be a fuel-to-the-fire day. And then if they beef up the secondary, this, again, should be a 150-yard or more day for Ollie Gordon. I think there's a chance that you get both a 300-yard day for Alan Bowman and a 150-yard ground day from Ollie Gordon. That's all dependent on, can Casey Dunn find the right matchups? Can he find the right scheme? Does he have the right game plan in place? And then once he does find some elements of the run game or pass game or whatever part of the offense that is successful against West Virginia's defense, will he actually freaking stick with it, right? That hasn't always been the case with Casey Dunn. Hey, there's no doubt about it. This year has been absolutely rough. I think if you follow me or O-State Daily, I don't pull any punches in terms of, hey, the display is unacceptable. Now, where I think I and a lot of people like me and others differ is that just because every time we have a couple of a bad patch of football, even if it's 5 games long, I don't want every single coach fired and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, Oklahoma State, they recruit in the 45s, something like that. They've made the Big 12 championship 2 out of the last 3 years, and they were a couple of inches away from making the college football playoffs squarely. This Oklahoma State, and they've done this with the same offensive coordinator they have right now, but with 2 different defensive coordinators, right? So, I mean, you can't just say, well, it was Jim Knowles and his defense and all that. Well, no, they've actually done it with a separate defensive coordinator as well. Now, there was a clunker in 2022. So far this year has been a clunker. So I definitely think this is a big game for Casey Dunn. This is a big rest of the season for Casey Dunn to prove whether, okay, is he the 2022 beginning of 2024 clunker, or is he the guy that made adjustments towards the end of last year and the guy that managed the offense in a way that got Oklahoma State inches away from being in the playoffs in 2021. I think this is a crossroads for him. I don't think it's impossible to predict which way it's going to go, but it's going to be interesting to watch. But the good thing about it, the reason why I say all this is I think today's a day that if Oklahoma State doesn't have a consistent day on offense today, consistently successful if they can't figure out how to run and throw the ball today. Like, they haven't done that all year, really. They haven't been able to run and throw the ball. If they can't figure out how to do that today against this West Virginia defense, that's going to be probably the most damning performance of the year for Casey Dunn in a year that's already seen several different clunkers, right? So because I just think just an average offensive coordinator with average scheme, there's hundreds of them out there that can figure out how to have consistent success on offense with the weapons OSU has at receiver, at running back, at tight end. Their offensive line's experienced enough. That has to happen. If it doesn't, it will be a bad damning of Casey Dunn, even more so than maybe some of the clunkers Oklahoma State's already put on the field to this point in the season. So we have a good crowd logging in. If you have any questions, if you have a chat, if there's any part of this game that you might want to know about or have a question about, just let me know, and we will absolutely get to it, and we will talk some Oklahoma State football and have a good time doing it. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I knew I was going to do that. Blaine Green, of course, the receiver at Oklahoma State. Garrett Green, one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the entire United States of America. No doubt about it. He rides on adrenaline. So if you're Oklahoma State, you can't let Garrett Green get going. If Garrett Green gets going, he gets that adrenaline, he gets that momentum, and he will become one of the best quarterbacks in the United States of America. And one of the kryptonites for OSU has been stopping a quarterback that can actually rush the ball. There's reasons for that. I think probably the main reason for the big plays with the quarterback running is because we're playing man coverage on the back end, which means our secondary has their back turned to the quarterback, chasing their receiver, and they don't even see the quarterback scramble. And then when we're on a blitz, the defensive line loses contain. Plus, your defensive lineman, short of maybe a Colin Oliver, which you don't have, and then your linebackers, short of maybe Nick Martin, of which you don't have, aren't going to be as athletic as Garrett Green. So if your plan is to contain Garrett Green with their defensive line and maybe one other linebacker, because other linebackers have to have pass duties, they have to have back out duties, maybe they have blitz duties, then that's going to be a very difficult ask. At some point in the game, Garrett Green will break that down and beat that and come up with at least one, maybe multiple big plays if that's how you're going to defense him. I just think you have to layer him. I think you have to get your eyes of your secondary on Garrett Green so whenever he takes off, they can rally and make it a 6 or 7 yard gain instead of not having their eyes on him, and now all of a sudden it's out the gate and it's 63 yards. So I think, yes, I agree with you, Josh Ray Slots. No doubt we need this win. We have a wonderful crowd logging in. I thank everybody for tuning into this. I've been saying it for, a while now. I am not a fan of the man coverage on the back end. I think our secondary is capable I think Corey Black is capable of being a good man-to-man defender, and I think there are times where you go man-to-man. But in situations, I just think it's too dangerous against mobile quarterbacks. I would play man-to-man against OSU because there's absolutely nothing that Alan Bowman can do to make you pay for that. He can't pull the ball down and scramble, and while your corners and safeties aren't seeing him scramble, he can't go get 63 yards like Garrett Green can do, like Isaac Wilson did against Oklahoma State. So I think one thing that Oklahoma State needs to do today from a schematical perspective on defense, I think they need to layer it a little bit better. Don't rely on just your rush having disciplined pass lanes and or your linebackers at the spy level to be the only layer of defense against Garrett Green rushing the ball. You need to layer it to where your secondary can have eyes on the quarterback at all times, quarters coverage, cover through whatever fancy coverages you want to have on the back end. I think it needs to be a lot more zone this week because I think you need to allow your secondary members to keep the receivers in front of them, which allows them then to keep their eye. They can look through the defender to the quarterback, keep eyes on the quarterback, Garrett Green. On the vice versa of that, if you can contain Garrett Green, not let him rush. He is the second leading rusher for West Virginia. And then, kind of play that matchup zone to where, yes, you're in zone coverage, but while you're in zone coverage, when a guy's in your zone, you're actually playing man-to-man principles against that guy. Make him throw into tight windows within a zone structure, and then don't let him scramble. That's how you beat Garrett Green. You get him frustrated, and then you heat up a blitz or two, and you force him into mistakes. But the problem is West Virginia's offensive line is very similar to OSU's. They have a couple of guys that were All-Americans last year, and they're experienced, and they don't allow sacks just like Oklahoma State's offensive line. At least they're very good at protecting Garrett Green, just like Oklahoma State's offensive line is. So it's going to be Oklahoma State, I don't think, with their front three, front four, however they played, I don't think they're going to be able to consistently get pressure on Garrett Green with just their pass rush. So I think you're going to have to blitz a linebacker or two, which then means that if you miss, Garrett Green slips out the back door. You can't blitz and then have man coverage on the back end of it behind that. I think every time you blitz and you lose a linebacker, when you lose a linebacker on a blitz, that means you're losing an extra spy, right? So the spy at that point needs to be the layering in your secondary. I think the cat and mouse game is what type of coverage on the back end does OSU have when they do blitz linebackers? Because I think they're going to have to blitz linebackers to get pressure on Garrett Green because, again, West Virginia's offensive line is very good at protecting him. So there is another cat and mouse game. Can we get home with our blitz? But I think more so than anything, kind of like in baseball, things only go perfectly correct like 5 times a year for hitters at the plate where their timing's perfect, the play in their swing perfectly matches the play in the pitch, and they hit it optimally. That doesn't happen very often. The guys that hit well are the ones, hey, how do you hit whenever things aren't perfect? So the way that I think that the determination as the type of day that the Oklahoma State defense is going to have today is going to be based on how do we minimize the big play when we do blitz or whenever we do something that's a little bit more risky and it doesn't work. Does that turn into a catastrophic 63-yard big play that turns into a touchdown? Or are we able to rally and kill it down to 7, 8, maybe 9, 10 yards and then force West Virginia to continue to have to go the long field and not just give them an easy, cheap score? I think that's the cat and mouse game for Oklahoma State's defense. I think this is a big day for Casey Dunn because I think there's so many opportunities. If you enjoy diving into the X's and O's football, I think all those types of people that do that would have to all agree this has to be a day to where he finds success schematically against this West Virginia defense. And if he can't, I think that's probably the most damning game of a season that's had some pretty bad clunkers, as I said earlier. So, hey, it's going to be a lot of exciting. It's going to be very exciting. I am getting ready to head that way to the motherland of Stillwater. Can't wait. It's my favorite 3.5, 4 hours ever. And I'll say this, I said it earlier, okay? Whenever a team's struggling like this, this is when they need you to show up the most. This is when they need you to be the loudest. This is when they need the most amount of support because right now, whenever they're reeling, okay? So I hope Oklahoma State fans, instead of showing up like, oh, this season's over, we can't win the Big 12, the automatic bid to the playoff is out, screw this team. I just hope Oklahoma State fans don't show up like that. Instead, I hope they show up with the attitude that, hey, there's still a hell of a lot to play for in this season. These kids need our support, and because of that, we are going to come and we are going to be loud, we are going to be proud, and we are going to have a hell of a good time, and we are going to help be that 12th man, if you will, and help Oklahoma State get on the right track. Because if you can go into the bye, we saw how much Oklahoma State did with the bye week last week. I mean, hell, they changed their entire offense. If you can go into the bye with some momentum, get some, what you do mostly in the bye week is you don't work on your opponent as much as you work on a self-correction, at least that first week. I mean, a lot of tackling, technique, all the little things maybe from a fundamental perspective that the Cowboys aren't doing. you spend that entire first week doing that. So you go into that bye week with some momentum, you figure out and work on some of the fundamentals that you haven't been executing very well. Maybe you tweak a scheme here or there like they did last year, maybe tweak personnel here or there. And then on the other end of that, if Oklahoma State loses today, I'll say this, I think they're out of Big 12 contention. And so if Oklahoma State loses today going into the bye week, I just don't see any reason why somebody other than Alan Bowman shouldn't become QB number one and get all the bye week reps, have 2 weeks to prepare for their next game. Whoever Coach Gundy believes is the future of this program, I think should be inserted at that time. I've said many times, I think it needs to be Alan Bowman. Until then, I think we're one loss away from that being the case. And if you did that right in front of the bye week, I think that would be the perfect timing to slip the future quarterback in for Oklahoma State and see what you got there. But just some of my thoughts on the game. I want to appreciate everybody that tuned in. This has been a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a lot more of these as I have time to devote to O State Daily. Again, I devote most of my time to the Dodgers Daily, and they're pretty hot and heavy right now with the NLDS starting tonight. You got Yoshinobu Yamamoto throwing for the Dodgers. That will be at 9 o'clock, I believe, Central Time tonight. Going to be super exciting as the Dodgers take on the Padres. But I spend most of my time on that side. I've just started kind of giving this side a little bit more time as we go, as it gains more popularity and all of that viewership. We'll be able to devote more and more time. I've got Mark Moore already in the can. I've got Jay Fleshman coming up, and so we have a lot of afternoon. Matt, thank you so much for joining. We have a lot of great things around the corner, but again, it's all going to be determined on how fast can this site grow. Is it worth me taking time away from my other sites to devote here? So it's going to be up to you how much you want another platform and another forum to have to talk about Oklahoma State football. So as we have a crowd that is growing in size, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this show here on Dodgers Daily. If you have any questions right now, let's get a mailbag going. Let's get some talk about OSU football going. Are you worried about Ollie Gordon? Do you think Ollie Gordon has run the ball with the same amount of conviction? Has he had the same type of vision that he had last year? You know, I know everybody's worried about Alan Bowman, and then the injury to Nick Martin. That is absolutely huge for Oklahoma State for several different reasons. If you noticed in the last game, hey, Matt, thank you so much for joining. It was a different game when Mark Moore played. What a hitter. Yeah, hey, Matt, actually, my first question to Mark Moore, it's a light moment, and I sent him the script of the questions and the outline of how the interview will go. My first question was, hey, you're forever linked to Chris Rockins, right? So got to know who's the hardest hitter, who's the hardest hitting safety ever at Oklahoma State, Mark Moore, Chris Rockins, or Trey Rucker? And I think you'll be interested to find what Mark Moore says about that. I just enjoyed talking to him. He's actually a middle school coach at Jinx now, doing very, very well. Had a long career in the NFL, played with San Diego and then also Seattle, of which Quentin Moore's son plays for the University of Washington right now as a tight end. So I'm super excited to release that video. But hey, what do you think about Ollie Gordon? The Nick Martin injury is huge because, hey, Nick Martin is your spy. He covers all of your backs that release out of the backfield for the pass game. We know he's sideline to sideline on the fast flow run game, chasing all of the outside run plays that the other team runs. He's also physical up the middle. And then he's also that back that him and Kendall Daniels, kind of like Xavier Benson last year. He's also that linebacker that Brian Nardo can use as a decoy in the blitz game and or just use Nick Martin with his speed to get home to the quarterback. So what a loss it is for Oklahoma State to lose him. You kind of figured in the Arkansas game, I know Mike Gundy said that, like, I can't remember what he calls it, but it's like it tracks how much they run and the energy they had to exert that day. And Nick Martin exerted so much energy on the grading scale that they used for that it was like unseen by like leaps and bounds to any other performance anybody else had. So at that point, you kind of had to worry about, it's like a pitcher, a bullpen, you know. You use your bullpen too much in baseball, they're eventually going to get injured. You kind of felt like with Nick Martin having to play and exert that much energy every single week, that something like this was bound to happen. That is an absolutely huge loss. Jeff Robertson, there's a couple of young guys. Jeff Robertson's going to have to play a big role now. Kendall Daniels is going to have to step up. A bunch of young guys that are going to get their chance, kind of like whenever Colin Oliver went down, Obi came in, right? Ezigbo. Now, the problem with that is Obi's good, but then what happens is you lose all your depth, right? Part of what makes Colin Oliver so good is that he had Obi Ezigbo behind him to come in and spell him and keep him fresh. Now Obi Ezigbo doesn't necessarily have that depth, and so yes, he's good, but he's going to wear down faster than Colin Oliver did because Colin Oliver had Obi Ezigbo behind him to spell him from time to time. I'll tell you another thing, Colin Clay and Iman Oates and all those guys up front, Xavier Ross and all those guys are good players. I've been very disappointed that our defensive line has not done a better job controlling the rush game. Man, if you can figure out with your front three, front four, however Oklahoma State plays, how to shut down C.J. Donaldson and not have to blitz or run stunt or do anything crazy, twist up front, something like that, to get the West Virginia run game shut down, that will really help because then I think that allows Brian Nardo to free up his linebackers to do other things, whether it be pressure Garrett Green, whether it be drop and spy on Garrett Green, whether it be drop into coverage or whatever. So every matchup's big, but Oklahoma State's defensive line has to start playing, I'll say better, but I'll also say up to their capabilities because I think this is a defensive line that is very capable of playing a lot better. I think it's a defensive line that's capable of being good, and I think it's a defensive line that is definitely capable of playing better than they are. It's a secondary, too, that has good players in it. Kobe Hilton, Lyric Rawls, Trey Rucker, Corey Black, Cam Smith, Cameron Epps. These guys are good players. They should be playing better than they are right now. I think our defensive line with Iman Oates, Xavier Ross, Colin Clay, all these guys, they should be playing better than they have been. And then I think our secondary should be playing way, way better than they have been. There's reasons for that. I think if you follow this channel, you know that I love the X and O savantness of Brian Nardo's brain. Having said that, it's not getting done right now. This has been an OSU defense that has been, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it, they have been absolutely terrible. And they don't have terrible players. They have very capable players. I think this is, as much, of course, give the other team credit some. I think these are schematical issues. I think it's issues of you're kind of caught in between. Do we want to run a 4-2-5 or the 3-3-5? It's one of those deals. I think you're trying to play a little bit of concepts of both, and I think it's just kind of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it's just not coming out right for OSU. And because of that, you're playing man on the back, quarterbacks are killing you, and then, you're getting man-beater routes and you're giving up big plays. Linebackers aren't, doing what they're supposed to do on particular plays, and it's just not working. Oklahoma State has way better talent on defense than how they are performing. Today would be a great day to start against West Virginia because C.J. Donaldson, he's a 4-5 guy. He's okay. But the second leading rusher is, I think C.J. Donaldson is a good player. Saying he's okay is a little bit too underrated. But Garrett Green's their second leading rusher, right? And so I think there's ways from a schematical perspective, you have enough players in your second and third levels to contain Garrett Green. And then when you look at the receivers, you're talking about Hudson Clement. They call him Huddy Tuddy. This is like a former walk-on. He is easily their number one receiver. Traylon Ray is a good receiver. But you're not going to look out at the West Virginia receiving corps, and it's not going to just strike fear in you. You're not going to go, holy smokes, we got to bracket this guy. We've got to devote 2 or 3 different safeties to make sure they don't blow the top off of us. They're just receivers. They're just You know, I mean, they're not bad or anything, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing that just makes you go, oh my God, how in the hell are we going to stop these guys, right? So this should be a game to where Coach Nardo is able to figure out OSU's defensive players from a personnel perspective will be able to match up one by one with the West Virginia offensive players and be as talented or more. So this needs to be a day where Coach Nardo needs to get it figured out. He needs to get the players in the right position, and he needs to get them playing well, playing the way that they're capable of. I've been very disappointed the way they played. It is what it is. There's no way to defend the production they put on the field. So for Coach Nardo, I think this is a big day for him. For Coach Dunn, he should have success too. I think if Oklahoma State plays well, if they scheme it up right, this should be a 300-yard passing day, 150-yard day for Ollie Gordon. It should be a day for the defense to where I think they have success against C.J. Donaldson and they fluster Garrett Green into some mistakes. They're going to give up some yards. I think they're still going to give up, no matter what they do, 400 to 450 yards, but make them empty yards. Make it to where, you know, you don't give up touchdowns. You give up field goals, and or you also created a couple of turnovers that maybe neutralized or canceled the 2 or 3 good drives that West Virginia should have. I just think, just looking at it all in all, this should be a game that Oklahoma State wins by 10 points if they play good. And if they play better than that and then West Virginia plays bad, this is a game that could be comfortable. I think from a talent level perspective, that should happen today, especially when you consider that Oklahoma State, hey, Wet Blanket, thank you so much for joining. Oklahoma, of course, both these teams have a bunch to play for, but, I mean, it's Neil Brown. I don't know. I think he caught lightning in a bottle at Troy. He was the offensive coordinator for Tommy Tuberville at Texas Tech. Remember those teams? I mean, they weren't good offenses underneath Neil Brown at Texas Tech. I think at Troy they beat Nebraska. They beat LSU. He caught some lightning in a bottle. So I don't think he's a very good head coach. So I don't think that's a rallying factor for them. But I think having all these seventh-year seniors and still with at least a remote chance at reaching the goals for the season, I think Oklahoma State has more reason and more capabilities of using that rally cry, circling the wagons type effect to come up with their best performance. And then also, too, West Virginia just had their bye week last week. Oklahoma State has theirs coming up, which is needed. There's a lot of motivating factor to it's kind of like your bowl game. You want to win that bowl game because you don't want to be sitting on a loss for your entire offseason. If you watch my Darius Bowman interview that I just released yesterday, he mentioned that the very point blank, we always put a lot of emphasis on winning the bowl game. Yes, it's neat to win a bowl game, but it's the first game of your next season. It's the game that springboards you. You don't want to be sitting around with that taste in your mouth all off season long. It's a lot better to have a winning taste in your mouth. So I assure you, coaches and players alike, it's a motivating factor to not have to sit through an off week off of a terrible performance and a terrible loss. It's way better to get right back at it when you're playing bad. So it's going to be a lot better environment if Oklahoma State can go into that bye week off of a really nice performance, a really good performance. And I think if Oklahoma State, you talk about process and results, if you just put out a good performance today, you're going to win this game. And so the results will come behind that. Yes, Wet Blanket, I agree. Just win, baby. Hey, Matt, for a program that's supposed to be based on consistency, we are everything but this season. That is a great point. One thing that Mike Gundy has been over his tenure has been calculated in his decisions. I think we all get frustrated with the length of time it takes him to come to the right decision, but he's been very consistent. And I'll say this, Matt, I think that inconsistency, there's two things that play into that. Quarterback play, Oklahoma State still is like the 11th best passing team in the United States this year, which seems weird because it just seems like Alan Bowman is super inconsistent. When you get inconsistent play from your quarterback and then you can't run the ball. So here's how you win on the road, Matt, in my opinion. You run the ball, you stop the run. So if you want to have a consistent team, the reason why those two factors win on the road is because it creates consistency. How do you keep the other team's crowd out of the game? You're consistently doing things that frustrate that crowd, that keep them from going bonkers, right? So even like if you're on the road and you have a good series, bad series, and then like 3 bad series in a row, then that crowd's going to be going bonkers. You're going to allow them to gain momentum. For the other team, it's going to make it harder. So that run game, stopping it and having a run game of yourself creates a certain amount of consistency that Oklahoma State just doesn't have this year, because when you can't run the ball, 3rd and 3 becomes a tough play. 1st and 10 is a tough play. And so you're going to have more 3 and outs, and it's going to become more inconsistent. So I think that's number one. You can't run the ball. And then number 2, Alan Bowman's had moments, but he's not Brandon Whedon by any stretch. His arm strength isn't anywhere close, and he's not all that accurate, especially when he's throwing off his back foot. So he's been inconsistent. So when you can't run the ball and then you have an inconsistent quarterback in the pass game, that's going to create a ton of inconsistency, even for a coach like Mike Gundy that wants to preach consistency. And then defensively, you can't stop the run yourself. And so it seems like the other team always has the ball. It seems like we're always backed up to our own 20-yard line and just trying to scramble around to give up a field goal instead of a touchdown. And it just creates, a situation to where it just doesn't. Now, obviously, the second half of Arkansas was a very good half of football. From that, they didn't give up any points until the last 2 possessions. But I think that's where the inconsistency comes from. And then you give up the big plays. So you can't stop the run. You can't run the ball yourself. Quarterback is inconsistent. Then your defense gives up big plays. That's where you come up with inconsistencies. And that's something that if Oklahoma State wants, and then also, too, Oklahoma State hasn't really been able to come up, other than like with the flea flicker, with the big play themselves on offense. Matt, very, very fair points. Thank you so much. I appreciate you joining. We've had a great crowd. Hopefully this, as we start doing this more and more often, I get consistent with my schedule. One thing I learned when I started podcasting several years ago is that the best way to grow something is to be consistent with your time, something of which I have not been on this channel whatsoever. So I understand that's going to make it much more difficult for people to even know when you're on. But as I get more time, I will try to make whenever I release my content on here or go live, more consistent. Like on Dodgers Daily, I go every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Those are my live shows, and then I release videos in the mornings of all my other days where they know all the time when the content is coming. Haven't got to that point on here yet, but hopefully we'll have a pregame and a postgame each week that are live, and then we'll have also some I'll get my raw thoughts on the live show afterwards, and then the highlight show each week. Now, there will be games that are just clunkers that, screw it, I'm not watching that game again. Absolutely, Matt. It helps if people hit that like button. And then to also turn on your notifications. Definitely hit the like button. When you hit that like button, what happens is YouTube thinks people like the videos, or leave a comment. Definitely leave a comment, too, not just in the chat here, but in the regular comment section, because the more that you interact with this video, the more the algorithm of YouTube thinks that people like it, the more it gets suggested, like with all the other bigger channels. And then like if the other bigger channels that are getting 15, 20,000 views, if you become one of their suggested videos because people like the video, then you have more visibility for your video. You get more views. So definitely, Matt, thank you for saying that. Definitely hit the like button and leave a comment. Hey, even if it's, hey, thanks, or go Pokes, leave a comment. That really helps. So, hey, unless we have any more questions, it is 12:19. I'm going to go get myself ready. I'm going to get in my 1997 Dodge Ram, and I'm going to drive my ass to Stillwater. I am going to park at Strickland Park. I am going to walk to Boone Pickens Stadium, and I'm going to have a hell of a good time watching Oklahoma State defeat the West Virginia Mountaineers today, and I'm super excited about it. So, hey, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I'm going to give it maybe 10, 15 more seconds here as we wrap this thing up. But until then, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been a whole lot of fun. We'll do more and more of these as we go. So until next time.